All right, today we're tackling a big one. We're going to break down what's essentially a new engineering blueprint for the human mind. Think of it as an operating system upgrade, one that's designed for a world completely saturated with AI. And just to be clear, this is not about some simple productivity tips or life hacks. We're talking about a formal cognitive architecture, a whole new OS for how we think. So let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like you're drowning in information? I mean, you're constantly scrolling, reading, listening, but somehow you feel less informed, not more, just completely overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of everything. Well, if that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And the big idea here is that this feeling isn't a personal failure. It's a sign of a deep structural system failure in the very way we're trying to process the world.
And this is the absolute key takeaway. It's not about your intelligence. It's not a personal failing. Your brain, the hardware, is amazing. It's perfectly fine. The problem, as the book we're digging into argues, is the software, our mental operating system. The fundamental way we've been taught to think is just, well, it's dangerously outdated for the world we live in now.
All right, Section 1, the cognitive crisis. So before we can even talk about a solution, we really have to get our hands dirty and diagnose the problem. What exactly is going wrong here? What's breaking down?
So here's the core diagnosis. We are literally witnessing what the author calls the collapse of language civilization. Now, what does that mean? Well, think about it. For thousands of years, language has been our main operating system. It's great for telling stories, for social stuff, but it's hitting a wall. It just can't handle the insane complexity of today's world. Things like global supply chains, crazy financial markets, or trying to understand what an AI is actually doing. It's like trying to run modern software on a computer from the 80s. The tool is just not up to the task anymore.
And you can see the symptoms of this collapse everywhere. When you try to cram a super complex reality into the simple box of language, what happens? Well, meaning gets all twisted and compressed. Really complex issues get flattened out into these simplistic, black or white binaries. Sound familiar? Language starts to break down as a way to get to the truth. And the result? We feel completely swamped, and yet we're blind to the actual structure of the problems we're facing. It's a classic case of navigating a super high-def world with a really low-res map.
Okay, that brings us to Section 2, a new operating system. If the old OS is totally failing us, what's the upgrade? What's the solution?
Now, the solution here isn't just another productivity app or a new way to organize your to-do list. That's kind of like putting a fancy sticker on a broken engine. Now, the proposal here is to build a whole new engine, a formal, structured cognitive architecture, or CA. This is a brand new OS for the mind, built from the ground up to handle the kind of complexity that language just chokes on.
And listen, the stakes could not be higher. The book puts it bluntly. Without a new cognitive OS, humans are forced into one of two roles: passive consumers of algorithmic outputs, or chaotic improvisers overwhelmed by complexity. Think about that. Either we just passively accept whatever the AI tells us, or we're just flailing around, making it up as we go. Either way, we lose our ability to steer. We lose our agency. That's a pretty stark choice.
Which brings us to Part 3, the 6-layer blueprint. Okay, so what does this new OS actually look like? Let's get into the engineering specs.
And here it is. This is the heart of the whole idea. It's called the Cognitive Constraint Scaffold System, or CCSS. Basically, it's a framework for what the author calls high-density thinking. It's just a fancy way of saying the ability to hold a ton of complex, layered information in your head at once and actually do something with it. The most important thing to see is that this is not a static checklist. It's a dynamic system. Information is constantly flowing, changing, and looping back on itself.
All right, let's break this down layer by layer, starting with Layer 1, the meta layer. This is the big one. This is the operating system for the whole OS. It's your why. It sets your ultimate purpose, your North Star. You can think of it like the Constitution for your mind. It defines the core values and the direction of all your thinking. And without it, the rest of this powerful system is just an engine spinning its wheels, going nowhere meaningful. Okay, next up is Layer 2, the field layer. This is basically the environment generator. It's the raw, unfiltered, chaotic reality hitting you in the face. It's the fire hose of information. So if you're an investor, this is everything. All the market data, every news headline, every tweet, every rumor. It's the messy, dynamic world you have to deal with before you've tried to make any sense of. So how do you deal with that chaos? That's where Layer 3 comes in, the context layer. This is your intelligent interpreter. It looks at that giant mess from the field layer, and, based on your purpose from the meta layer, it asks a simple question. What actually matters right now? It's the bouncer at the door of your mind, filtering out all the noise and only letting in the relevant signals. For that investor, it's what lets them ignore 99% of the chatter and focus only on the data that affects their specific strategy. Now we get to the engine room, layer 4, the concept layer. This is the logic core of the whole operation. It takes that nice, filtered information from the context layer and starts to build with it. It applies your mental models, it maps out cause and effect, it uses reasoning to build an actual, coherent structure. The key word here is that it makes reality computable. It turns messy data into a model that you can actually think with.
Okay, but an abstract model isn't enough. You need to connect it to the real world. That's the job of layer 5, the content layer. This is where the visible output starts to take shape. It takes that abstract logical structure from the concept layer and fills it in with concrete stuff, specific examples, hard data, actual diagrams. So for our investor, their abstract model of market risk now becomes a set of specific charts, key data points, and paragraphs from financial reports. This is where the theory gets backed up by evidence.
And finally, we have layer 6, the form layer. Think of this as the external interface, the UI for your thinking. This is the final expression. It's how you package everything up and send it out into the world. It could be the language you use, the design of your presentation, the aesthetics of your product, or the specific action you take. This is how your deep, structured thought actually interacts with reality.
But here's the most important part of the whole system. This is not a one-way street. It's not a simple assembly line. As the diagram shows, the output you create in the form layer, your action, your words, that goes back out and re-enters the field. It changes reality. It creates new information, which then becomes new input for the whole system. It's a constant, dynamic feedback loop. And the book argues that real intelligence isn't in any one of these layers. It's in the speed and the quality of that circulation, that entire loop of thought.
All right. Section 4, Human-AI Structural Alignment. Now, why are we going through all this trouble to build such a detailed architecture for our minds? Well, here's the payoff. It completely changes the game when it comes to how we interact with AI. So think about how we use AI right now. It's mostly a command and control model. We type in these fuzzy, low-resolution prompts using plain language and kind of just hope the AI figures it out. It's like talking to a genius assistant through a tin can and a string. The new method proposed is structural alignment. Here, instead of a vague command, you share your entire high-resolution cognitive structure, your CCSS, with the AI. The AI can then literally plug into your way of thinking, becoming a true cognitive extension, not just some external tool you're barking orders at.
And this leads to a really profound point. The quote says, "Judgment is the last irreducible human function." As AI gets scarily good at all the middle layer stuff, the reasoning, the logic, the content generation, our unique value doesn't disappear. It just moves up the stack. It moves to the meta layer. Our job becomes exercising high-level judgment, setting the direction, defining what's important, making the final call. And this entire cognitive architecture we've been talking about, it's all designed to protect, stabilize, and supercharge that one uniquely human skill.
Now, let's zoom all the way out for the last section, the next civilization. Because this isn't just about you or me getting better at thinking. The book frames this as a blueprint for a massive civilizational shift.
And the timeline for this shift is, well, it's huge. We're talking 300 years. The argument is that we're in the very, very early stages of a transition that's just as big as the invention of writing. We are moving from a civilization that runs on the operating system of language and stories to a new one that runs on an OS of formal structures and computable systems.
So what does that mean for us? It leads to this final, really powerful takeaway. In this new structured civilization, the whole game of power and influence is going to change. It's going to shift away from the people who are the best at telling persuasive stories, and it's going to move toward the people who are best at designing, building, and operating the cognitive infrastructures that actually shape how we think and see the world.
And that leaves us with a pretty critical question to ask ourselves. We spend so much of our lives just stuffing our minds with more content, more information. But how much time do we spend actually designing the architecture that's supposed to hold it all together? In this new age of truly intelligent machines, the structure of your mind, your cognitive architecture, is going to be your single most valuable asset. So the question is yours ready for what's coming?